If a comic book does really well, sometimes it can get a second print. But everybody knows that that first printing is where all the money's at, right? Yes, absolutely. But there are a few instances in which the second and even later printings can be more valuable even than the first print. Some people like to say that it's a matter of scarcity and that these later second, third printings have a lesser print count. But that's the case for like every single second print ever. So it isn't that. So what is it? I broke down what can possibly make a later printing more valuable than a first printing into a couple categories. First things first, shout out to Evil Empire Comics having a grand expansion opening this October 12th. Make sure you show a little comic book love and get out there and say hey. And don't forget, our 40,000 subscriber giveaway is coming up like pretty fast. You could win the first Miles, Laura, or Spider-Gwen in 9/8 white pages. All you gotta do is like, comment down below, and be subscribed. 99.999% of all second and reprints are not as valuable as a first print. Perfect example, the first appearance of Cable, worth however many hundreds of dollars in any given market, whereas the second print, which you can tell by its gold background, is worth like $5. Whether you agree with it or not, it's what we make it. We are the supply and the demand. We set the ground rules for what is desirable and what's not. And there are some things that people hunt for different reasons. The first reason is going to be multi-packs. We've mentioned that before on this channel, but what is an example of a comic that could possibly be worth more than the first print? If it's in a limited release or very highly collectible pack. Maybe it was packaged with a toy and it's extremely rare to find, like the Spider-Man 2099 second print, which was packaged with a Spidey toy. Or the famous Toys R Us multi-packs, which would sometimes display a DC Universe logo variant, as we like to call them, on the later printings. Sometimes you have combo packs, which is actually made up of less than 1% of existing copies. I know there's a lot of early 20-teens, like New 52 stuff, that can sometimes have a pretty big price tag with combo packs. I found that these multi-packs have a very unique collectability about them and can often, in fact, make a later printing more valuable than the first. I've started to see a turn with the Whitman pack variants. Did you know there's something called the Whitmans? It's actually technically the very first direct editions ever. In a sea of newsstands, you would get these Whitman packs. Sometimes they would be in a pack of 3. They would be in a later printing of a book, and people are starting to really find that these things are pretty cool. With some exceptions, we're starting to see a Whitman end up being more valuable than the regular printing. Another example in which a reprint can actually trump a first printing would be an example of a better cover. This can happen sometimes where a second printing is just a better looking book. Most famously, we have to bring up Batman 608. Cover A was a Jim Lee cover, and it's great. It's actually a classic cover on its own. But cover B, oh my God, especially when you pair it with Superman 204, chef's kiss, man. That just is one of the most iconic covers of all time and might just be Jim Lee at his best. Another example in more recent years is actually the first appearance of the Clown, Hawkeye number 9, came out in red and white. What a missed opportunity. Well, the second printing took care of that and made it purple, because after all, that character just looks way better in purple, so it makes so much more sense. Another example is Amazing Spider-Man 583, when Peter Parker meets Obama. Cover A doesn't have him on the cover, whereas all the later printings do. Obviously, with a key like Spider-Man meets Obama, you'd probably want to see Obama on the cover, and you're not getting it with the first print. Another example in which a later printing can be better than a first, monetarily, would be a better color choice. I'm going to mention Batman 497 here, very famous Bane breaking Batman's back. There are later printings that look ever so slightly different. The third print is the most valuable one, and it has an inverted color scheme in the title and just looks a little crisper. It looks a little contrasted and a little more saturated, and looks nice. And yes, like all other later printings, there are less of them. So combine the slightly more attractive color scheme and the fact that it just has a lower print count than a cover A, I get it. Darth Vader #3, first Dr. Afra, has that purple background on the 4th printing. There's a lot of printings of this thing. The 4th is easily the most desirable one. Everybody likes the purple color scheme. I'll give you an example of a dollar bin book versus the 2nd printing, which is like $5. Fantastic Four, $3.71. As far as I'm concerned, I don't even think cover A or the book as a whole is a key at all. You definitely find this in dollar bins, whereas the 2nd print in all red has more desirability to it and typically can sell for $5. When you're talking about a matter of a few bucks, though, it's not a crazy difference, but some of these are so noticeably more expensive than the first print. Another example of a reprint selling better than the first printing is if it's also the first cover appearance. I'm going to mention Venom #3, certainly a popular book right now with the news, the first appearance of Null, right? Well, Null isn't on the cover of the first printing, but he is on the cover of the 3rd printing. So whether you consider later printings a first appearance or not, you could technically say it's the first appearance of Null and the first cover of Null. Another example would be Amazing Spider-Man 569, the first Anti-Venom. Another famous one here with a 2nd printing shows Anti-Venom on the cover, whereas the first printing didn't. So obviously the 2nd print's going to have a bigger price tag. Captain Marvel 17, one of the most expensive ones here. Kamala Khan becomes Ms. Marvel. That's a big one. Cover A, first printing, but that 2nd printing, very iconic imagery right there. That's where the price tag is. Another example of a reprint selling better than a first print is if it's a better gimmick. Here's what I mean by that. And a lot of this is going to fall into the 90s, but not necessarily. The Scotty Young cover of ASM 611. The first printing shows Deadpool and Spidey. They both have a text box on the cover, but the 2nd printing is Deadpool actually saying a joke. I don't know why the first printing didn't do this, but the 2nd printing just makes more sense for the cover. He's making fun of the cover. And the first printing doesn't even deliver a joke. So obviously people are going to choose this 2nd printing over the first. It's a better gimmick. Web of Spider-Man 90, by the way, the first preview of Spider-Man 2099 has that center silver foil bit in the center, holographic Spider-Man image. Well, the 2nd print has a gold Spider-Man image. And again, lesser print count, but all 2nd printings are lesser print count pretty much. This one's more desirable simply because of the gold. And it's going to be the same thing with the Wolverine 145. With the silver claws, the 2nd print, which a lot less people picked up, is the gold claws. And that has a really noticeably higher price tag than the regular silver foil. You should check out the 9.8 value of that sometime. It's crazy. There's 2 more examples in which a reprint could outshine a first print. And I've only got one example here for you, but sometimes you have a 2nd printing that is an error. And I mentioned this recently in another video, but with TMNT #4, already an expensive first printing, it's tough to go up against that and trump it, but they did. And it's because for the 2nd print of issue 4, they had a certain art designed for it, and they accidentally made it the cover of Tales of TMNT #1 and slapped it on issue 4. Pretty big oops, they caught it right away, so there's not many circulated out there. But if you find a 2nd print that really confuses you because it looks like it's just a Tales of TMNT #1, that is more valuable than a first print TMNT #4. Our final example of a book outshining the first print is if it's actually rare. Because again, all 2nd prints and later printings have lower print counts than the first print. So by that logic, everything's more scarce than the first printing, with some exceptions. But there are some later printings out there that are actually really frickin' scarce. Of course, I'm going to mention Hulk 377. In 1991, we got our first Professor Hulk in 377 classic cover, and the first and second printing came out in the same year, which totally makes sense. I don't know why they decided to do it, but 4 years later, the third printing came out. By that point, people already had the book, so no one was really seeking it. So it had an extremely limited desirability. Who would need it, right? Well, no one wanted it. So it was an extremely limited print count, distributed only, I believe, to North America. And there's some gossip about some of it was lost at sea. It's unconfirmed. I don't know how much of that is real, but yeah, I have to say the third print of Hulk 377 is actually really hard to find. I've been buying collections almost 2 to 3 times a week. By the way, this is a good time to mention, I do buy collections. I pay better than anyone else. Hit me up if you got some stuff. And I never see this third print, and you know what? If I do, it's usually riddled with spine ticks. Obviously, some scarcity is going to come into play. So again, multi-packs, better covers, better colors, better gimmicks. If it's an actual first cover appearance, if it's an error, or if it's actually rare, can make a reprint better and more expensive and more desirable than a first print. Write down below one of your favorite reprints, second prints, third prints, fourth prints that you dig more than the first print. I'll see you at the next video, and keep on hunting. Make sure to come on down to Sentiment Depot's Antiques and Collectibles, located at 238 West Delaware Ave in Pennington, New Jersey. Find so many great books for just $1 and the lowest prices on key comics around. Enjoy a huge selection of graded comics priced up to 20% lower than current fair market value. We are open from Wednesday to Sunday, closed Monday, Tuesday. You got a collection you want to sell? Bring that too. Can't wait to see you there.